Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Crazy Dad's Garage. We're going to tackle the next step here on the motor on the GMC truck. So, on the last video we got the block all, there it is, covered up, but painted and ready to start putting back together. Today we are going to work on the cylinder heads. So I've got them here on the bench with me, and we're going to turn the camera around and start tearing into these. What I'm really going to do here, I want to make an inspection of these heads. The guy that did the motor before, I'm not sure if they really rebuilt them and put new seals and stuff in them, so I'm going to tear them apart and try to figure that out. And while I got it apart, I may touch it up a little bit, and I will clean it and paint them and get them ready to put back together on that block that we got going. So I'm going to figure out how to get the camera set up here on the tripod so that I can start tearing into it. Be back in a second. Okay, so here we go. First thing I'm going to do, pull spark plugs out. I've got them loosened up here, so we'll get them all out of the way. Real easy to break them off, and I kind of assume that these are brand new plugs with 100 miles on them. So I don't want to destroy them any more than I have to. Speaking of which, that's the one out of the one where the piston came apart. Yeah, it got pretty hammered there. So I guess we will be getting at least one new one. Anyway, we'll deal with that when the time comes. So the next thing I'm going to do then, let's see, I'm going to pull the rocker arms off of here. And it looks like we've got them loosened up, so I'll go get the right wrench to do that with, and we'll get them pulled off and set aside. Alright, let's see what we got here. Yeah, that's not exactly what you want to do with things. Alright, back in business. Anyway, I'm probably going to fast forward through this so that you don't get bored with watching me just undoing nuts and bolts here. So we'll whip through it here real quick, get these pulled off, and then we'll move on to the next step. Yeah, so I just realized that my editing program doesn't allow me to fast forward, so there's a couple of spots in here that we're just going to let it run long. That's what it's going to have to do. But anyway, you'll get the picture. I did cut down significantly part of it that we were just taking up a lot of time on. And I think what I'll do is cut it out so that you're not seeing me do the same thing over and over again. Anyway, little editing comment there. And that one is stuck, so we're going to have to do a little more persuasion to get that off. See if this works. There we go. Alright. Knew it couldn't be too big of a deal. Okay, next thing we're going to do, flip it over so we can take the valves out, and for that you need a valve spring compressor. And I have this really gnarly ancient old one here that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's been bent and re-straightened and everything, but usually for the things that I'm doing, it's good enough to get things torn apart. So we will flip this thing up here, I think. Let's see. Not sure which way is going to be the easiest direction to get it from. Maybe neither. How's that? Anyway, I think I can get it from that direction. So I actually put a tape measure on these valves, and I've got 2-inch intake valves, and can't remember what the measurement of the exhaust were, but that's a pretty decent sized valve for a Chevy head. Let me go grab my tape measure. People talk about 202 intake valves in their heads, and so that could be that what these are. Nope, I would say they're just under 2 inches. And my exhaust valves are about 1.5 inches. So anyway, I think what we got just a basic, fairly utilitarian head here, but should be adequate for what we're looking for, because again, we're not after high RPM performance here, we just want a good solid torquey motor. So let's start seeing if I can get one of these things to come apart here in the process. I don't even know if this is going to work. I may have to, now that I think of it, I may actually have a newer valve spring compressor somewhere. That's not going to work. It doesn't fit my the valve spring caps there. So I'll turn this off, be back, see if I've got that other valve spring compressor anywhere. Alrighty, I had to go find a different valve spring compressor, and it was a totally different style. Just a picture up close there, so it grabs the spring and compresses it like that so you can get the keeper out of it. I wasn't even sure it would work the first time I saw it, and so I finally decided to rent one because I didn't find the big C-clamp style one, but it does what it needs to do here. So yeah, I've got that one apart just to test it, make sure it worked before I start videoing again. So we'll undo it, and then I'll go back through and get all of these others pulled out, and I'll show you what kinds of things I'm looking for here. Hopefully I can do this without hurting myself. Anyway, I'll show you the first one as I walk through it, and then I'll do the rest of them in fast forward so that it doesn't just eat up all your time here. But alrighty. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So, when I get that thing down on there, grab a couple of the coils of the spring and then start tightening it down. And while you're doing that, the thing wants to rock around a lot. Let's get it here. Sorry, I know you're not going to be able to see a whole lot on the camera there, but I'll kind of explain to you. So I've got it snugged down. I'm going to start putting some pressure on it. Now as I do that, I want to make sure that these two bars in the middle here are offset enough that they will clear the valve spring keeper inside of there, so I can actually get it out when I'm getting the thing compressed. So I've got that done. Now I'm going to compress. And what happens is you start cranking on it here, and on this head, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not making any progress. And what was happening, see now I've got it loose there. What's happening is the valve is sliding down there easier than coming up and allowing the keepers to come out. So in order to fix this, I have to rock that over, hold the valve up, and do something in there to keep that valve from going back down, and then I've got to get it to let go of those keepers. Maybe I got to put a little more pressure on it here. And I got to be careful here. I don't want to necessarily smack it here with a hammer because that could bend that valve down below. But we're going to have to do something like that to get it to release that friction pressure in there. So I'll just play around a little bit here. I can't remember what I did on the last one now, honestly. There we go. That let it go. Now you probably can't see, but the keepers are loose, so I'm going to little bit more pressure there. Start wiggling those keepers out and be careful not to lose those things. There we go. Springs out. For those of you that don't know, there's a little valve keeper. There are two of those. One goes on each side of the valve stem. So there we go. We've got that one where it moves back and forth. Now we can move on to the next one. Actually, you know what? I'm going to pull those out. On these, they've got a rubber O-ring type of valve stem seal that I have to get off of there, out of the keeper grooves. Yeah, so there it is. Where we have, there's a camera. So there's a little seal. We'll put it in with the keepers. Now, one of the things I can do is I can pull my valve part way out and grab a hold of the end of it and try to move it up and down. And that will tell me if I've got play in there, which could mean that the valve guide's worn out too much. And I think we're okay on these. There probably shouldn't be any. I've got a tiny bit, but I think I'll be all right with it. So that's what I'm going to do here. There's my valve. That one is an intake. There. Get my exhaust valve out here. Keeper off of it, or the seal off of it. Same thing. It's in about the same condition. So anyway, there we go. I'm gonna take a minute here to look those valves over a little more carefully, and then I'll go ahead and continue the process on here. So I'll be back in just a second. I want to look them over. Okay, we're going to go ahead and pull the rest of them apart real quick here, and then I'll talk to you about what I'm finding and what I think here for what that's worth. So here we go in the fast forward mode. You know what, I was going to show you fast forward on this, but it's just too time consuming. You know how it works. So I'm going to take them all apart, get them set out here, and then we'll be back and show you the thing when I've got it disassembled. Okay, that was quite an ordeal. I think it always has been for me anytime I take valve springs apart, out of cylinder heads, because most of the time when you're doing this, you don't have professional quality tools. It's just get by kind of tools, and they got by and we got the thing apart. But yeah, I had all kinds of adventures there, including one spring that came out of the compressor after I had it apart, went flinging all over the shop and parts everywhere. And so yeah, interesting adventure. But that's the nature of what we do here, right? Okay, so here's some things that I will show you here. So here is, we got an intake valve, which is our large one, and an exhaust valve, which is our small one. Now these are the two that came out of the cylinder that had all the damage in it, and so I really wanted to check them out. They seem to be in decent condition. No big nicks in them. No, didn't find any chunks of stuff embedded in here where the valve had come back up and pinched it between there and the seat. And so that's always a good sign. I think they're reusable. Don't see any problems. However, the one thing that I'm pretty certain of now after tearing this apart is that when these guys rebuilt this engine, they just did the bare minimum, and then they didn't even do the heads. I suspect they didn't even take them apart. And a couple things that have led to that, little valve stem seals that I showed you before, little O-rings. I found several of them that look like this. I get you. I see they're broken, and they're hard and they've cracked, and so I don't think they ever had new ones put in them. Plus, as I examined the surfaces of the valves, it does not look like they've ever had a valve job done on them. They're quite dirty. you know, with the normal deposits of running an engine, way more so than what this one got run, which was just that 100, like I said, 100 miles or so sitting in his driveway for the most part. But I flip it over here, which I haven't done yet, and just looking in here at the valve seats, I want to be able to feel around there and make sure that we don't have anything, any dings or nicks in those seats, and I'm not feeling any. So I think we're going to be all right there. I'm not seeing any damage in this combustion chamber or anything. It's there were a lot of big chunks of aluminum flying around in there and some broken piston rings and stuff, but it doesn't look like it actually really damaged anything. So I'm really glad about that. So that's kind of, I've got to sit down and reevaluate my thinking process here, because I wasn't planning on spending any money on these heads. And I don't know if I'll do a little bit of thinking, maybe consult with a mechanic friend and just see if they're usable. They've got a little bit of play in the valves, but not a lot. Yeah, that's in the valve guides. And at least it used to be you had a couple options there. You could knurl the valve guides, which I don't know if anybody even still does that, which that's running a piece through it that looks like the tap used for tapping a bolt out. And what it does is it makes the inside of the valve guide smaller, and then you run a sizing tool through it to bring it back to the normal size. And it's kind of a get-by thing, but it used to be used a lot in the early days. Today, I don't know. Everybody's going to be wanting to drill out those valve guides and put some new valve guides in it, which would be the best idea, undoubtedly. I just, being a low buck thing like the plan is here, I just got to debate this and see if there is a direction I want to go. I got to find out what costs are on things like that and some of those things. So that's kind of where I'm at on it. One of the things you want to look for is, in order to run unleaded gas, when you're dealing with a motor that's this old, a lot of them were designed to run only on leaded gas, and in order to run on unleaded gas, you have to have hardened valve seats put in there, especially on the exhaust valves, or else they just corrode into the cast iron head. But this one looks like it does have those hardened seats in it, so that's a good thing. Means we won't have to redo that. The real question here is whether we'll do the guides or not. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at this point. I will get the other one torn apart, and we'll make some decisions there, and I'll come back and finish out this video after I've done that. So we'll talk to you at that point. So, as I've torn these things down, I've gotten to a point I've got to make a decision. Could they be reused? Yes, they could, but I want to be able to put this thing together decently here on this assembly. And so what I'm looking at, I don't think when these guys rebuilt this motor that they really did anything to the heads besides clean them up and reuse them. The seals seem to be the old original seals in them on the valve stems, and some of them are broken, so that's going to mean oil consumption problems. And if I go ahead and put the new ones on, it's probably going to help some, but still not be perfect. So, as you saw, as I tried to demonstrate, we pulled those valves out and moved them back and forth a little bit, and there's a little bit of play in there, and I would rather get it to where we don't have any. Give me just better longevity on this motor. And I also, it looks like that they didn't do a valve job. I don't think any of them are not seating necessarily, but I would like to clean them up and have a good valve job done on it. So that's going to wrap me up here. I called the machine shop, and they told me that to get this done here in my local area, to get new valve guides, which are that part right down there, for those of you that don't know, that the valve runs up and down in, to get new guides put in and do a valve job and surface the head so that we're flat again for sure. was going to cost me about $400. And so, hey, honestly, that's not in my budget right at the moment. And so I'm going to start saving up money so I can do that. But I am going to disassemble this other head down here, get the valves pulled out of it, and have everything in a package and ready to go to the machine shop so that I can have them go ahead and do that for me, because I think I want to do that. Just gives me a better engine. Like I said, I could make this work, but I don't want to cobble this motor together as I'm putting it back in there. I'm going to go ahead and I'm wrapping up the will it start video on the motor that's in the truck, because for right now I think I can get that motor started and running, and put my good exhaust manifold on it and get the exhaust fixed back up. And I think that way I can get the thing where I can drive it and have fun with it. And then I'll keep moving forward with these heads in here so that we can get this project moving. But anyway, those, I think I've been able to demonstrate a few things here that'll help you, know how to tear a set of heads down and look at them and determine if they're any good. I guess the last thing, let's do this. So, sorry, I'm going to grab the tool here that I wasn't planning on getting. Let's say that we want to check and see if your head is been warped, because that will be what will be the determining factor. If you can get yourself a straight edge like this, and you got to be sure that it's straight. And I've done this with 2 or 3 different ones. And so when you get a straight edge on here, if you can see daylight under there anywhere in the middle, then you know you're going to have to redo it, because if there's daylight, that means that there's enough distance that if you measured it, it's going to be enough that you will want to be able to, you'll want to be surfacing it. It'll be out of tolerance. I guess that's the word I'm looking for. So a straight edge like that, using a carpenter square that's in good shape, and literally most of the ones that I've seen that were warped, I could literally see a fairly significant amount of daylight as it crossed these areas right here. And that's what's told me that I would need to redo them. So that is probably the last thing that you would want to check on one of these. The question of whether or not to put new valve springs in one, that I would say if you can make it in your budget to do that, you ought to buy a camshaft and valve spring combination. Especially if you're going to plan on it being a high RPM engine of any kind with new cam technology, you definitely need new valve springs. On one like this, where we're talking about keeping this as a lower RPM motor and building torque in it, then we could probably get by with these. I know there are people who will disagree with that, but it's been done thousands of times. It just kind of depends on what your purpose in building the motor is. So those are kind of the things you need to look for. I guess there's a lot of different stuff, but those are the basics of it. I knew this came off a running motor that was running pretty good, so I wasn't too stressed about getting into all the details of it. But anyway, there you go. I'm going to wrap up this little episode here with this teardown, and then when I get these machined and get them back from the machine shop, I'll go through the process of cleaning them up, painting them to match our block, and then we'll be able to continue on with that part of the assembly. For right now, got the block over here. I'm probably going to get my crankshaft put in, get the pistons and rods put in, and camshaft and things like that. And that'll probably be what the next episode is here on Crazy Dad's Garage as we do that. So there you go. Going to wrap up here. That's my episode on the head disassembly and checkout.